Well, the clock is ticking on the expiration of the DACA program. If lawmakers don't act by March, hundreds of thousands of Dreamers could be subject to deportation. Now, these are people who were brought into this country as children, some as young as infants. Obama administration, they protected as many as 800,000 of these folks from deportation. President Trump, however, gave Congress 6 months to deal with DACA. Half of that time has already passed, and very little, if anything, has happened in the interim. Now, the Trump administration has also ramped up immigration arrests. They're up 40% just this year, and we are seeing reports from across the country of terrified immigrants who are scared to even leave the house for fear of getting arrested, let alone deported. Now, the Times, they took a look at Atlanta. It's a city that needs immigrants for its workforce on a per capita basis as much as any city in the country. But it's also at the same time, while asking for their work, cracking down on the population itself. Now, the piece describes people getting pulled over for a broken taillight, then winding up in jail for a week. Immigration police say they are not targeting immigrants, but advocates say that the community is being targeted by the police. Joining us now, Karin Anderson, director of Neighbors Link Community Law Practice, a group on the front lines of helping immigrants when it comes to legal issues. As always, good to see you.
It's good to be here.
First, let's deal with DACA. It's timely in that as we're talking about a government shutdown, a lot of people think, and it's been echoed by both Senator Schumer and Congresswoman Pelosi, excuse me, that this is the levers they want. You want to keep the lights on in the government. There's a few things, DACA chief amongst them, that we're not going to just trust if the budget gets reauthorized, that this will be taken care of between now and March. I gave some numbers here, but you've done a much better job than I over the years about putting faces on this. Just how much of a pressing issue is this for people that in the next 3 months or so, their lives could change?
It's an enormous stressor, and a lot of people who are very afraid. I have friends and clients who their lives are going to fall apart in the next couple of months. They won't be able to drive, they won't be able to work, they won't be able to function, and they've lived their entire lives here. So the stakes are extremely high. So I'm very pleased that, that the issue is being taken seriously and that the plight of these individuals is really being seriously considered.
To that end, beyond the status of just Dreamers, the Times did a really interesting piece, and they focused on Atlanta, but it's not just Atlanta, but there at least, we have situations where people are afraid sometimes to leave their house, to go to work, to take the kids to school, because they don't know what could happen next. We mentioned somebody with a broken taillight. Somebody gets a ticket of any kind here. It's not theoretical. All of a sudden, they're getting cuffed as soon as they walk out of the courtroom. We haven't seen that, though, in the Westchester area or in the metropolitan area, to your knowledge?
It's been happening in New York City, not in Westchester, but it could. It's important to know that there's nothing really stopping that from happening now. The Immigrant Protection Act, if it had passed, had a provision that would have prevented ICE from making arrests in our courthouses here in Westchester County. But that act did not survive the veto override vote. The executive order that the former county executive issued does not address that issue now. So it hasn't happened yet, but as it stands now, it certainly could.
And we've had so much, I think, misinformation with this whole debate around sanctuary cities. To be clear, if there's a serious offense, a felony, or more specifically, you're going to get deported. It's
Absolutely.
Not that everybody gets protected here and they're the same thing. We're talking, there's a distinction with a difference between a violent felon here versus somebody who has a broken taillight.
Exactly. The term sanctuary cities really gets used and abused far too much. Any jurisdiction that, even jurisdictions that use the term sanctuary to describe themselves, all they're saying is that we want to make sure every member of our community feels safe to report a crime, go to the courthouse, or interact with law enforcement. Nobody anywhere in the country is saying we are not cooperating with the federal government to prosecute crime and to deport people where they are threats to security or serious criminal convictions. That's absolutely not the issue. The goal is for our community to be safe.
In fact, when we talk courthouse arrests, up 900% in this country. You heard my number right. That's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
That's happened in the interregnum. Now, before I let you go, I really want, as best you can, to articulate how much has changed in the last 11 months in this country in terms of populations of people that, while they're looking for full-time legal status, they may have been in limbo, but they weren't always living in fear. The palpable fear of people you talk about having families ripped apart, about not knowing when they leave their house, if they're going to come back, it's something you haven't seen before, have you, on this broader level?
I have never seen anything like this before.
Because I think some folks out there think, well, there's a lot of talk in Washington, but nothing's really changed. It's been a sea change last year.
Absolutely, it's been a sea change. People are very afraid, and these numbers that are coming out, like the 900% increase in ICE arrests at courthouse, have a profound chilling effect that erodes people's trust in our system of government and erodes public safety. You know, what your viewers need to know is we can't be safe as a community unless everybody in this county feels safe reporting a crime or going to a courthouse.
And you know, we talked earlier this hour about with Al Franken's resignation and obviously the major change with the Me Too movement. But if you think from a practical level, if a person isn't of legal status and they're worried about getting arrested for a taillight, if all of a sudden they come forward to law enforcement and talk about being battered or abused or harassed or whatever else, they're not going to do it now because they're afraid that they're going to be thrown out of the country for reporting a crime.
Exactly. And I think, you know, just to make it real for folks, what that means is that somebody, a resident of Westchester County, could have a neighbor, say somebody who lives 3 or 4 doors down from them, and that person is a victim of a crime in her home. What if that person's concerned about going to the court to prosecute that case? The witness, the person knows everything. You know what the result is? Is the perpetrator of that crime is still loose in that neighborhood. That's what we're talking about. That's law and order, and making immigrants afraid to access law enforcement and access the courts creates exactly that kind of frightening scenario that we really should be about avoiding.
Well, we're going to hopefully have more information on the future of DACA in the coming days here. And of course, we'll continue to report it. But Karin, as always, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Coming up next, everyone, we'll have a quick check on local headlines. So please, stay with us.